a little over 10 years ago when the county put the equestrian park land on the ballot to be sold. And also on that ballot was the potential for sewer district in Target Range and the whole Western Reserve area, I guess. And it was actually one of the county attorneys who told me to look at some water quality studies, which changed my mind about the value of using the city sewer. I thought, gee, it's fine. Now I think that it's really wrong to use a river system for a sewer. I don't understand why everywhere else in the country we're spending millions of dollars to get away from using rivers, and here we're using a river. It's just wrong. In fact, I found it so wrong that I went to the Water Quality Advisory Council meetings for several years. I also went to the meetings when the engineers would come for the wastewater treatment update meetings. And I don't understand why when I quit going to those meetings, the engineers had their preferred options laid out. And their number one option was to have like 5 satellite systems that would not be near the river, and that was not presented to the public. But I think I know why, because it would be a different political tool. It wouldn't have the same impact for annexation that we see here and what's been used. I really wish that if this project goes through on 3rd, which I hope it doesn't, but it probably will, that we could stay in the county as long as possible. I love rural fire. I love county roads. I want to. Yes, please do.
Please, Adrian, highlight that, would you?
Yeah, put that in big letters. I love the volunteers and the way it's run at Rural Fire. They saved my house last year. They saved people's house. I mean, it's sort of City Fire. I'm not knocking them. But we have volunteers. And when I've seen kids get hit in front of Hawthorne School, there are volunteers there like that. They stop the traffic. They help the children. There's always volunteers there. We're going to lose that. We're going to lose a lot. We're going to lose value from our tax dollars we pay. And county roads can sand. I have all the traffic on Tower Street for Big Sky. We have those immature drivers. It makes such a difference when there's sand at that 4-way stop at 7th and the other one at Spurgeon when there's some sand there. These things are really important. I could do all sorts of other things and get really emotional, and I am inside. Please protect our property and keep us in the county as long as you can. I wish things were so much otherwise, and that there was at least land application of the sewer effluent. It's just wrong what's being done. All you have to do is drive out on North Reserve with your window down to smell that that thing doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Expert. Would you like to speak now? Would that be good?
Yeah, I didn't intend to speak, but I'll be glad. My name is Bo Nelson, spelled Nielsen. I live on South Avenue. And I'd like to say that we thoroughly enjoy our, I'm sorry, thank you.
Speak right into it, please.
We thoroughly enjoy the use of our property out there. And we moved to that spot in 1996 after living in Butte. So it's a remarkably different environment for me and my family. How did we get there? We assessed the existing conditions of the city, of the settlement of Missoula. It goes beyond the city. I learned later. It goes to Target Range. Oh, what's the condition of schools? We have children in school, so we assessed the schools. We interviewed folks, interviewed the administrator at the school, interviewed parents of pupils at the school. We interviewed people near, as we focused in to places, we interviewed people. How do you like it here? What's the government like? What are the neighbors like? What don't you like about the place? With this information, we decided on the purchase of a home. It's a big deal. Doesn't sound big when you look at a whole neighborhood. There's a whole bunch of people making the same decision, but it is important. So we base our purchase of property for our home site based on existing conditions and the prospect for the future. There's a certain amount of trust in that future because you don't have the time to do all the research of the plans that were listed up there. But and Warren pointed out that some of those plans are even hard for a permanent resident to get. So, I don't know, life goes on. But we get to places because they're attractive. They attract people for the use, say like in parks. I was just sitting next to Ann. She's very excited about the county parks, and so am I. I use them, I enjoy them. In the Target Range area, you have a city park, you have school lands, you have this wonderful new pathway around the Target Range area that I don't think, unless I'm out of town, I'm on that path every day. I mean, it's just thoroughly enjoyable.
There you got another kudo, Greg.
Thank you. So the place is attractive. What are the qualities and quantities of the place? That's what people assess. Keep them, maintain them? No, I'm for development. But in a development that's a character that, or has the characteristics that are amiable to the place. In other words, they're friendly to the place. They're not adverse to the place. What would be adverse in Target Range? The kids can't get to school. I can't use the path. I don't know. Those are maybe small things, but they're a day-to-day thing. What would be adverse at my home site? That I couldn't operate my well, that I couldn't operate my septic system. I like to be in control of my home site. That's something that comes from me from my my father and my grandfather, that this is the way we live. So there's a lifestyle thing. Norm suggested that. Adverse to me at my home site would be a subdivision at my neighbor, for example, that is a 5-acre subdivision from the 50s, that there'd be a multitude of houses there. Oh, could I live with another house on that 5-acre lot? Surely, because there'd still be a garden, there'd still be a dog run, or whatever there is for animals that the family would enjoy, etc. But more dense, no, that would change the character of the place. So the density, and it's prescribed in the zoning, which is not being, pursued. There is larger than 1-acre home sites. They are being utilized. One of the things, I better talk to my wife before I leave this. One of the things my wife really enjoys at our property, because of her agricultural background as well, is we have cows grazing next door, we have horses grazing next door, horses utilized in a ring. We can walk over to the equestrian park for events over there. I love to take my grandchildren over there so they can see it. They can chat with the folks, particularly if it's young people involved with it. The same thing over at the ball fields. I guess I've said enough.
Thank you, Mr.
We assess things from the existing condition, from interviews of folks, what's the prospect for the place, and we make a decision, large decision, in a homestead purchase.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. Next person.
Mr. Evans, my name is Mike Cadis. I apologize, I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes. I have another meeting at 4, but I did want to take a few minutes and try to address some of the issues that have been raised. I won't address the water quality issues. I think there are a number of people here who have the scientific and engineering expertise to do that.
Get the mic right up close to your face, please, Michael.
I will talk about, is it on?
Yeah, it just has to be
Okay.
close.
I do want to talk about the growth issues because those are discussions that I know we have all been involved, and I know folks in this room have been involved with for years. And we're not going to stop being involved in them. They're going to keep coming at us. And what they force us to do is make decisions that we probably would rather not have to make in the first place, because they involve change, because they mean that we have to change things, that the last gentleman who just spoke, the character of a particular neighborhood is likely to be different than it is today. And he didn't buy where he's living because of what he thinks or thought it might be in 20 years. It's because of what it was today. But we don't have that choice anymore. I mean, Missoula has become so popular. We continue to grow at 2 and sometimes 3% a year in this valley. And we can't single out one neighborhood and say, okay, you're not part of the solution in this whole picture. And I think we understand that implicitly as we look at the various plans that we have worked through, as we have adopted these plans. I mean, one of the kind of fundamental baseline levels of logic that we use is that we'll grow in kind of concentric rings, and that makes more sense for the provision of infrastructure, for the provision of services, that as we get bigger, we'll do it kind of from the core on out. And that's kind of one of the underlying themes that we've adopted in all these plans. And any of us, when we look at a map of the whole valley, we look at the target range area and we say, you know, that's going to develop out. And it's not just because it makes sense intuitively to us in a logical way, but it makes economic sense. I mean, it's what the market drives and demands. And I think we've seen in the numbers there's been a fairly significant amount of growth that's happened in target range. And I think we all know that will continue, sewer or not. It will continue to some great degree. And I hope what we don't end up with is the situation like we did in Linda Vista, where we had the growth and then it grew at what was allowed by law, but what happened was law wasn't stringent enough and we had major water quality problems. And so then we had to go back at great expense and require everyone to hook up on sewer. And that's the kind of situation we set ourselves up for here. A lot of this, clearly people are going to continue to come to Missoula. And if we say that, okay, this area is off limits, that doesn't mean that the people who would have moved to this area aren't going to come to Missoula. And the pollution that they bring with them isn't going to come to our aquifer and to our river. It will just happen in other places. And you know, whether it's on septic or on sewer, the impacts will happen to the river. I think what we need to do is go back and honor the plans that we have worked through as a community. I mean, it's not just the elected officials that have done that. The city's spent a lot of resources trying to do that, trying to acknowledge, okay, we have jointly adopted these plans and moved forward. If we had not done that, I mean, if we had had this kind of a policy in place 40 years ago, what would our valley look like today? I mean, what we would have done in that case is probably sprawled all the way to Frenchtown. I mean, half of the growth, over half of the growth in Missoula, the south and to the west, has happened in the last 40 years. Much of it facilitated by sewer and ultimately by the city and annexation. I don't think those are dirty words. I hope that I know the transition is difficult, and as the mayor, I want to try to facilitate that, but I think that a transition, it's going to happen. It's forced upon us by national markets. People are going to move here, and until we find a way to shut the door, it's just not a choice we have. I hope we can work together to try to build the best community that we can for all of us, understanding that it is a collected unit. We can't take pieces out of it and say, okay, we're going to treat one area special and we'll kind of ignore the problem until it erupts someplace else. So I hope that I understand your desire to do this hearing and try to bring this situation to a resolution with a little less acrimony. And I hope we can do that. I hope we're all successful in that. But I think in the long run and even the short run, we've all invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in trying to figure out how this community is going to respond to the market forces that we live in. And this is one of the fundamentals. I mean, the target range is kind of what Wapakea Bellevue, or what the South Hills, or even Farviews, or the Lewis and Clark neighborhood was 20, 30, 40 years ago. They will all change. They have all changed over time. And that's just one of the facts of life, of living in a beautiful place that other people understand is a place that they want to live in as well.
Thank you, Mike.
Could I ask Mike
Yes.
then some of the questions that Mike Seystead had written down? So I guess the first question is, does the current rattlesnake litigation prevent action on this project? In other words, has the court enjoined action based on the plan being challenged?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Another question is the annexation. At the end of Steve's presentation, he mentioned annexation being delayed, and I believe it said till 2010. Your proposal was to 2010 to a certain street, right?
West of Tower, what we would not do, here's what the proposal is. If the county will enforce similar building codes to what are currently in effect in the city, then we would not use the petitions generated by these sewer contracts to annex any areas west of Tower until after January 2010. Okay, so that doesn't...
So that would be for new homes, is that what you're saying?
That's the only, well, that would be the vast bulk of them, I suspect. There would also be homes that have existing sewer where the sewer fails and they need to hook up, and so we would require a petition at that point. But what I'm saying is that we wouldn't exercise those petitions until certainly no earlier than January 2010. Chances are it wouldn't happen until sometime after that.
Okay, and another question is in regard to zoning. If the property is annexed and the city then has to, the area is all zoned, the target range area to some degree or another. If the zoning is, the city comes in and annexes and adopts zoning, what protest rights are there to limit change?
In municipal jurisdictions, well, first of all, there's a change of zoning upon annexation. And there are three guiding rules on that. We can either use comparable zoning, which is we essentially have a table that equates certain county zones with certain city zones, so we can do that. The second is we can follow the comp plan recommendations within the comp plan for the particular area. And the third option is if there is a specific county set of rules, we can adopt that. So that's state law. That's what the city has to do. Now, if you're changing zoning within the city, the protest provision is, I believe if it's 25% of the properties within 150 feet of the property to be zoned protest, then it takes a 2/3 vote of the council to override the protest.
So you do have protest, you can override protest.
We
with
can.
2/3 vote.
It's, it's pretty difficult. Usually what happens if you have a developer and they expect that kind of a response to their project, they don't go forward because they don't want to invest the $40,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 in getting get the proposal ready. They'll go back and work it out with the neighbors.
Then the last one is, could you address some of the issues that were brought up in regard to other infrastructure? So we put in sewer, but there's still roads and walkways and traffic flow and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, within the transportation plan that was just adopted, we did anticipate a level of build out in the target range area, and that's in the transportation plan. There are a number of projects that are recommended in the transportation plan. I suspect that, what we'll see over time is the signalization of several of those intersections along Reserve, so Spurgeon, 7th. I can ask Bruce to respond in more detail if that, most
The
of,
problem with the transportation plan is it's a plan without enough money.
that's true. Yes.
Mike, has it been long enough for them to have it printed? I think it was just passed a short time ago. My guess is they're not available because there hasn't been time to print them, is that correct?
No, it's printed.
Is it printed? Okay, thank you.
Could we make sure one's at the library with big red covers?
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bender from the Public Works Department, Mr. King are here. I apologize, but I do have to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person who would like to speak. Anyone who has not spoken yet.
Good afternoon, I'm Will Snodgrass, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd like to comment first on the Linda Vista issue. The Linda Vista problems took place because the law was not followed with respect to environmental review. Had the law been followed, the federal law, that would not have happened there. With respect to the Rattlesnake Coalition's lawsuit and adjournment with respect to West Reserve, that is certainly an option. That is the coalition's option, and they could file paperwork to adjoin. With respect to the transportation plan, which I think is a very important component of this whole discussion, involving somewhere between $80 and $110 million of unfulfilled needs, Mr. Reed Smith and I, who have investigated the plan, are quite certain that that plan was released without all the information attached to the appendices, so the public did not have the proper legal right to comment. And Mr. Smith believes, on the basis of his professional work with BLM over 20 years, that that plan was passed illegally. I would like to talk very, very briefly about the alternatives that Barbara brought up in 1995, and which folks from DEQ have actually been over here to talk about with at least one commissioner. The alternatives that are available today are really wonderful. Let me give you one example. There's a device called the Aerojet. It was developed by Dr. Terrell Hogue out of Sam Houston State University. It's available as an $885 retrofit kit. It can drop into the inspection port at the top of your septic tank. It's highly innovative microbubble technology that performs very well. The testing that was done at the Texas Trinity River Valley Laboratory showed that it outperformed, in terms of nitrate removal, the currently upgraded wastewater treatment plant by 7 to 1 or 14 to 1, depending on which test you looked at. Certainly that's something that could be installed by contractors here in Missoula for probably less than $1,500 per home. It allows you to recycle water in this time of drought, which brings us to the subject of the Penn State system, which is experimental. That system produces electricity, and it does not do it through heat transfer. It actually uses the sewage as the electrolyte for a battery. That's the wave of the future. On a more practical level, if you look at the Toronto Healthy House project, which uses the Waterloo system that Mr. Barron's referred to, that system is currently in use in a demonstration project. It's an amazing home, and a lot of the water is recycled for use in the home for toilets and for bathing. In the Zhenjing Hotel in Shanghai, China, there is a BioPure system that is installed in the basement of this absolutely astonishing 80 or 100-story hotel, state-of-the-art. All of the waste is processed in the basement, and the water that is discharged there is cleaner than some of the drinking water that enters the homes in the city. Yesterday I received from Florence, where there was a similar sewer battle, from Pat Coombs, a website for the form cell technology, which is an adaptation of the Waterloo. It is very, very cost effective, very, very efficient. The drain field sizes are also very, very small. So we who are concerned about the future of ourselves and our offspring and our loved ones, we are not complaining about necessarily what is being done, but we're complaining about how it's being done. We believe that the very beautiful National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, should be fully complied with. We should not be subject to half-baked environmental assessments that are inherently flawed. And with respect to the 99 wastewater facilities, EA, as it's called, which was unsigned, I had that reviewed by an international expert who testifies from the World Bank. He said it's the worst document of its type that he has ever seen. So we would like the law to be followed. We would like these documents to fully disclose the options, the alternatives that Maureen Bolton referred to, which are the heart of NEPA. And there is an awful lot of room for improvement in the way we treat the waste. Most certainly, either of the two water loop systems, whether it's the water loop biofilter, again a foam membrane, or the more passive and actually more efficient water loop system that Jerry talked about. There are two water loop types. Certainly those outperform the wastewater treatment plant and protect the river. And they also give people the right to reuse the water. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Next person who would like to speak. You're going to talk again if you keep that up.
They started back there.
I'm teasing him. Go ahead.
I'm Myrna Price, and my remarks will be very, very brief. I just want to say that Mayor Cadis, when he was up here, just confirmed what we've been trying to tell you all along. This sewer by the city is not about water quality. It's all about growth.
Great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dale Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R. I live in the Target Range area, and I've lived there for about 35 years now. I've moved there from the city of Missoula because of some of the problems that were occurring in the city. And I really don't want to see those start to reoccur into an area that I've moved into and learned to really enjoy. Also, I do want to pass along and join some of my other neighbors in stating that we've been very satisfied with the county services from County Road Department, Rural Fire, County Sheriff's Office. Whenever we've needed them, they've been there. I also would like to state that I was observing some of the statements by the mayor about trying to honor some of the commitments, and then he moved on into discussing the Bellevue, Waupakia, Linda Vista areas. I think that that's one of the things that he probably needs to also address, is trying to honor some of the commitments they've made to those people in those areas. Currently, you see litigations going on with the rattlesnake, just from the very thing that we're talking about here today, and that is the sewer system going out into an area, and then them using that as a club to annex those areas into the city. So I would ask you to please think about the comments that have been made here today. Think about what people have said, and I hope you'll act accordingly from those statements. And when I watch the MCAP programs and attend the city council meetings, I quite often see people come up, make statements like have been made here this afternoon, but the city council turns their back on those people, and I hope that you guys will not do that to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Next person who would like to speak. Next person who would like to speak. Okay, we'll let Adrian change the tape while you're getting up here.
I just have a comment.
We have first.
I'm sorry, Leetta Peterson. Where we live, we have 5 acres. And every morning I look out and I can see Lolo Peak and the sun just coming up. And we have horse pasture. And we're just getting so many wildlife that it's just fun seeing it again. But you just wonder how long it can last. And we have the fox, the bald-headed eagle in one of our trees, and always the deer. And I was just watching out the window, and all of a sudden I seen a deer born, which I didn't even expect, you know. And raccoons come every night and get their cat food and carry some the logs that we have in our yard. And I'm not kidding you, look out front and there's the ski area, snowball. And it's just beautiful, and I know anyone and everyone would love to live there. And I enjoy it, and we've been there forever. And about every month there's another house blocking a little bit more. And but we're sure thankful for what we've had while we've been there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Anyone else who'd care to speak?
Leslie Alexander, and I'm new to the area, so I have not one of these older people, but I purposely chose the target range because of what it is. And I think another gentleman referred to that you can't predict the future and how things remain. But so a few points I just wanted to make is that is able to maintain. It's not inevitable that it can grow. And if you look at, I have relatives who live in New Jersey. You don't think of New Jersey as a beautiful place. They live in an area, in the area of Bernardsville. You would not believe it, but that area is 45 minutes from Manhattan. They have maintained their dirt roads, they are county controlled, and they have allowed the growth to go elsewhere, but they have controlled it because the neighbors and the community have stuck together. If anyone knows this, you'll see that, like my predecessor talked about, the beautiful countryside and the wildlife. That's why people like living in the community. When I moved here a year and a half ago, if I wanted to live in the university area, I would have done so. But now my fear is, my 3 points I'll make is, the impact on the community. I was quite sort of shocked and surprised when that man read the statement that the response on that report was no. We are the community, and so this is the comments that we're making, and I hope that you would listen to that. And to the developer, we are the market too. We have a say. We're the market. I don't want my house to be on half an acre with somebody looking out the backyard. And when you talked about that people should have the freedom to use their land as they see fit, yes, but there have always been some limitations on how people use land. You can't have a strip mall, you can't have a business, you can't have a farm next to certain things, you can't have a church or a cemetery. There are limitations. So yes, people should be able to have the freedom to do what they want with their land, but there are limitations. And so when the person talked about having limits and lot size acre limitations, I think that's something that should be taken into consideration. And just one other thing that also came to my attention when they were talking about the recent growth that had been there, had been kind of continual. I counted about 358 homes that had been added to that area since 1980. Well, on that lot in this farm acre that's opposite my house, where they could build 5 acres on 40 acres, 5 houses per 40 acre, per acre on a 40 acre lot. That would be 200 houses, probably in less than 2 to 5 years. That's a significant difference than 358 acre houses added in 20 years. And lastly, I'm sorry, as much as Mr. Mayor Kadis is probably a very nice man, but when they talked about the growth, and of course you read in the paper about the reduction in school attendances here and the closing schools in the city of Missoula, well, I would be one of those people. I would leave. I would leave the city of Missoula. And so I'm just one drop in the bucket, but that's just to let you know. I'd want to stay in the county. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd care to speak? Anyone else who'd care to speak? One last call. Anyone else who'd care to speak? There being none, we'll close the public hearing. Do we have any comments by the commissioners, questions, or motions?
I wanted to ask the questions that our attorney had written in regard to water quality to either Bruce or Steve, since Jim left. One of the questions that folks have brought up is how many units within the city are not currently sewered, and what are the steps being made to connect them, and what incentives? And another one would be the leakage from existing lines. Those are the two I'll ask together.
Bruce Bender, Director of Public Works. I'll do with the line issue, and then Steve he's got the numbers, he can deal with a septic inside the city. In regards to the sewer lines, basically the city actively repairs any lines that it needs to, that we've come aware of that are a problem. Basically, in the last 12 years, we've replaced or repaired 1.5 miles of sewer lines throughout the community at over 200 locations at a cost of almost $1 million. And that's come through extensive reviewing of sewer lines. For instance, in '94, we looked at what we call our large diameter sewer lines. That's what carries most of the flow. And basically, those systems were rated in good shape. And then we had one line that was rated for improvements, which has been done. Also, annual routine maintenance is that we clean every sewer line once, a little over, that's about over 240 miles of our sewer line. We clean those lines once every 2 years. And what that means is you're running a jet hose down the line. And so anytime there are any problems encountered by the maintenance crew, then we do prioritize that particular location and it's video inspected. So basically, I'd have to say that in response to the city has known leaks or broken sewer lines, I would say that that's not the case. That if anybody can show us a broken sewer line, we'll go repair it right now. Now, in regards to trying to get a better understanding of our sewer system, we did go here a couple years ago. We decided to TV inspect over 7 miles of our older sewer lines on the north side of the river. And basically in that inspection, we found that we had 60 linear feet of that 8 miles, I guess it actually was, that we inspected. There were 6 spot repairs that had to be basically taken care of in one section of line. So we had actually this year, as a result of that inspection, replaced that whole sewer line. So my point about that is that if you look at the data, if you look at our average flows, in other words, if you look at the population that's connected, and then you talk about how much wastewater we're receiving at the treatment plant, we meet or exceed all national standards. So this quote leakage, the facts don't, we're basically receiving 114 gallons per capita per day at the plant. So that represents a fairly tight system. In regards to the infiltration issue, that's a completely different dynamic. That does not represent leakage. That's talking about groundwater, which is a pressurized system. Basically, when you have groundwater rise above your pipe, it's pressurized. And so therefore, the upper areas, which don't have any sewage water running over it, can therefore allow entrance of groundwater. And that happens in basically one fairly localized area here in the downtown area, and it is on our plan to eventually go and slip line those sewer lines. But from a perspective of when you look at, again, a national statistic, our infiltration rate is quite low compared to national systems. So again, I guess that's about it. You keep on going for that stuff. Steve can respond to the other
Steve, you
issues.
wish to add?
It's a question about numbers of sewer connections within the city, and I think it's relevant to the VNRP fulfilling. Just wanted to restate to the commissioners, in July 21st, I had sent a memo to the commissioners with some numbers related to accusations and flyers from the Target Range Homeowners Associations versus some of the numbers of record between the city and the City County Health Department. To summarize, there's approximately 870 unconnected septics or cesspools within the city limits that are documented. In addition to that, there's 1,338 properties with no connection record. That means that they may be connected, they may not be connected. What we found is that those, when we've gone to check, the majority of the properties with no connection records within the city limits adjacent to the sewer are connected. Now let's, for the most conservative numbers, if you take the 870 plus the 1338, there's a total of approximately 2,208 properties within the city that are either not connected or may not be connected. We just heard today again what would be an inaccurate number of approximately 6,000 properties within the city. That's simply incorrect and not supported by the records whatsoever. And so, assuming that, again, the most conservative situation, there's 2,200 properties. Of all the properties within the current city limits, including the Rattlesnake, by the way, we're to connect, and that includes the Rattlesnake project, which we're trying to get online as well, we still would not meet the VNRP requirements as illustrated today. Did that answer your question, Jim?
So there's two more pieces. So what steps are you taking to connect those? I know that my property was one of the ones that didn't have a record, so when I called and said, in case you don't know, and you pay on your tax bill for the water quality district, you pay more if they don't know you're connected. A little bit more. Both of them are low fees. So they came out, put dye in, and I know that mine is connected. So that's one step, I imagine. Is there anything that you, so that's kind of the homeowners taking the incentive. Is there anything the city's doing?
Oh, Rich, you're right on. There's a variety of things. Record management is one of them. We've got literally probably 95 years of sewer in the community from the very origins of the downtown Higgins and Broadway, downtown Old Town site to today. Old records are much less accurate than they have been in the last 40 years. So older homes, older properties that are connected may not have a record. One of our continuing efforts, and we've made concerted efforts in the past and we continue, is record update, record management. Any property owner can request a dye test at any time. That's a free service provided by our wastewater treatment division, and they'll come out, and that serves two purposes. It alerts the property owner whether they're connected or not, and it helps add to our base of information. We update our record on that property. So we've done that both responsibly to requests. We've done it proactively with summer programs where we send interns out and dye test neighborhoods in some of the older parts of town. How do we encourage connection, though? I think that's the most important. The first and foremost is to get the sewer available to the properties. We find that in the older neighborhoods, the university area, downtown, as we go and check, well in excess of 95% of the properties are connected. Over time, septic systems fail, properties connect. The first prerequisite is to have the sewers in the ground available to the property when they connect, or when they fail that they would connect. So our efforts in coordination with these plans is to get the sewers into the unsewered neighborhoods that are the highest priority. We've, as you said, several hundred, approximately 500 of those 2,000 homes in the city are in the Rattlesnake, and we've made efforts, and there's been litigation trying to delay the efforts to put in sewers in the Rattlesnake. Likewise, in other areas, we continue to upgrade our operations. As those upgrades happen, in other words, as we rebuild a street, we test all the properties, make sure that they're connected. If they're not connected, then we actually compel them through city council process during the street reconstruction to connect. So there's several efforts within the city to try to encourage connection. In addition to that, Water Quality District has independent efforts where they have incentives, subsidies associated with these utility projects that are intended to be incentives to connect. And usually it's a several $100 rebate if property owners connect within 2 years of availability.
So one other question then is, in regard to some of the alternative systems we've heard about today, like the Waterloo system, my understanding is some of those aren't permitted in Montana at this time.
There is a variety of systems. Some of the systems, as I understand it, the Waterloo system, I cannot speak with authority yet because it's a state approval process and I'm not current if they might have approved it today. To my knowledge, as of this date, the Waterloo system is not available or marketed in the state of Montana. I do not know that it's licensed with the state. I simply do not know that. I know that several months ago when it was checked, it was not. And so to my knowledge, it's currently not available for use. It is in place and experimental. Your city county health department has installed an experimental unit, and Department of Natural Resources and Conservation have done experimental units. I must say, in a rural application, given the right maintenance and operation, if it's well maintained, they're highly effective systems. The trick is it is a finite element. We talked about the the phone technology. Once you install an on-site advanced system, you're done. And then as soon as it's installed, it's probably out of date because next year there's a better system. One of the fundamental differences between these on-site systems and our central treatment is our central treatment is constantly being reviewed, monitored, professionally maintained, and upgraded. And we've got a variety of upgrades of our central treatment system. That simply would not be the case if on-sites were installed throughout the neighborhood. So that's one of the things that is, I think, very important to realize is that it's very different between having one central treatment plant versus having thousands of backyard treatment plants. And there's an efficiency to having that one plant as far as upgrades. There's an efficiency as far as operation and maintenance of that system versus entering into people's private property, maintaining potentially thousands of on-site systems. It doesn't seem like a practical alternative to me.
Other questions?
The last one is what percentage of, and I can't read his writing too good, I think he means nitrate, reaches groundwater and about the fecal chloroform from septic systems.
That's a health department question.
Okay.
Sorry, can't help you there.
Thank you, Bill.
Just one question. Do we know how many septics in the target range area failed this year or last year?
I do not know that. There's a routine percentage. I mean, it depends on the, there's a variety of factors, of course, you know. But there is ongoing failures of the system. They reach saturation point, many of them. However, when the high groundwater situations, there is a cleansing effect in some of the, not the leach fields, but in the cesspools. And they're literally cleaned as the groundwater rises and operate for a disposal system into the groundwater continuing to be effective. But there is a certain failure rate in all of the neighborhoods, and I don't have the statistic of what that rate is in target range Orchard homes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Any other
Thank you.
comments or questions or motions? Jean, do you wish to speak first? Or Bill? Whoever wants to talk first can.
Well, okay. Let me just say that I thought the presentations from Mr. King and Mr. Carlson were excellent and raised very important facts. I also think that Mr. Behrens and other speakers raised very legitimate concerns in this matter as well. We have an obligation, or one of our obligations is to protect the public health and safety. And we are sitting on top, all of us, of our source of drinking water. So that's a huge obligation for us to consider. It's also very important, in my view, to listen to concerns that citizens bring forward in a very serious way, to take them seriously. I think you've raised legitimate concerns. I haven't heard an argument that there's an immediate kind of critical need to sewer target range. There's, in my view, someday it will be sewered. But the way the city is going about the process is, in my view, it has a huge cost in terms of your belief in your local government's ability to listen and to somehow address your concerns. I haven't seen a detailed plan that deals with all the infrastructure that's needed to deal with putting in a sewer. I think that needs to be in place. I think, in a way, the city's got the cart before the horse in wanting us to okay the excavation permit and then do some work with OPG. I think what we need to do, in my view, is to assign a planner to work with you folks for the coming year and to see what are there real viable alternatives that can work. I mean, I think there are good points on either side. I'm a layperson. I haven't seen enough to make up my mind about the alternatives. But I also think that we could be a lot more creative about doing things like transferring development rights from one area that doesn't want higher densities to another area that would be suitable. Gallatin County just did that. It's a difficult thing to do in Montana, but it's been done around the country. And so we need some time to take a look at what other things we might be able to do. I would say that within a year, we should make a decision. And I know it's costly to wait a year. It'll cost more. On the other hand, litigation costs a lot as well. So I'm currently in favor of taking more time to see if we can find some reasonable compromises, some reasonable approaches to this that does respect your way of life, but it also brings into sort of a greater acceptance of what the realities are here. I mean, at 482,000 gallons per day into the aquifer, I mean, that's not something we can, in being entrusted with, protecting public health and safety, we can't just walk away and ignore that kind of fact. So I'm not in favor of granting this excavation permit at this time.
Jane, do you have comments or motions or anything you'd care to say?
Well, I think that from the testimony today, I agree with Bill that the city and the health department both did very good presentations. I think that folks in Target Range are very fortunate. You probably have more open space that's protected by, as Sue Matheson said about the equestrian park. You've got the parks at Fort Missoula, the trails that Wally likes to walk on, and somebody else said that they did too. And there are a lot of unique things to protect out there. I think that the impacts on human environment, the fact that it says no impact anticipated is in disruption of native or traditional lifestyles or communities is not the whole story. And then one after that is cultural uniqueness and diversity. Will the action cause a shift in some unique quality of the area? And the city's response is that indirectly the project will affect the rural character, and proper planning and zoning can help maintain. I think we need to address some of the zoning issues and the need for all the other infrastructure in a more comprehensive way before we go forward with.
As is usually my policy, I try to tell people where I'm at and what I think so that you won't go away with a question. My philosophical point of view is that citizens should have freedom to choose where they live. People use the word sprawl in a negative way, but to me sprawl is all about choice. It's allowing you to live where you choose to live, not being forced to infill or live in a concentric ring around the city. That offends me, so I can't support that. I have long supported additional systems, and I have to admit to Lorene and Will that I had forgotten I'd written a letter, but I haven't changed my mind since then. I have given numerous articles to Mr. Carlson on wetland systems. I've never heard of the Waterloo system, but I do believe there are sand filters and other things that do work. And I also was unaware that the state had not approved some of these systems, but I don't think that's a thing that can't be fixed. I do think support from the local folks going to the legislature could achieve allowing alternative systems. I believe that we're elected to provide public service, and that means to you folks. You're here, you come, you say something to us, and you expect us to listen. We're not here as your masters, we're here as your servants. My vote is going to be for denial because of these reasons. I'd also like to point out some things that happened in the past. The city's promise of no annexation for X period of time, I can't rely on that. I remember we had an agreement with Linda Vista some years ago, and Linda Vista, I think, really shot themselves in the foot, because when there was federal money or state money, whatever it was, available, they didn't want the sewer. And it would have cost them maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a piece at the time. And there was 3 or 4 opportunities for them to decide they would accept that money. They didn't. And when it was forced that we would shut the system down based on the state, it cost them like $10,000 a piece. But that was their choice. But the agreement that we had with the city was that they would not annex until X amount of time. And I have to admit, maybe I wasn't watching, but somewhere along the line, another statement got put in there, unless 51% of the houses sold, at which time they could then begin annexation. I didn't realize that comment was in there. So it started out as delayed annexation, and it wasn't delayed as long as I anticipated it was going to be. I think we need more examination of the alternatives and more public involvement in order to reach a conclusion that's satisfactory to folks. Growth is not going to stop, folks. It's our own doing. We have children, they have children, they need jobs, and they need houses. Not everyone that is coming here is staying here or coming from someplace else. Many of them are the result of our own family expansion. So I also think if the city's major concern was the aquifer, they would consider contract sewer without annexation, but they don't do that. So my feeling is if someone will make a motion to deny this request, I would certainly support it.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Two things I'd like to say.
Okay.
Just that I do believe that there's a water quality issue that probably is okay today, but I think that there will be, that as growth continues, the lady that said she had 5 acres there can already, with the zoning that's in place, probably either have 5 or 10 homes, depending on which zoning area she's in. So growth, we see subdivisions out there all the time, so the growth is happening. Like you said, it's not too fast yet. And I have to applaud the city for wanting to get the infrastructure in ahead of the growth, because that was our problem out Mullen Road, is that we had 2 failed systems out there that we needed to connect to the city sewer, and that was why we had to go out that direction. So I just hope that people realize that we do need to plan in your area and try to protect some of the neighborhood character that you want, but I think you have to realize that every time I look at anything from Target Range, I have zoning map and I have aerial photos that I always look at, and you can see lots of potential for growth even without sewer. So things are going to change, and the water quality could be impacted by it all. So I hope you'll keep that in mind as we go forward. And those of you that live in the zoning district that don't have density, you probably want to start talking to your neighbors about putting some density in there if that's what you really don't want.
One of the other things that I forgot to mention is we have folks who do want growth. They do want to be able to develop their property, and if it's dependent only on the ability to get the sewer, they either win or they lose. If alternative systems are allowed, and they could use an alternative system, that does not deny those folks the right to develop. Bruce, I'll give you one last shot here, and then we're going to have a vote.
I was just trying to clarify your action. The denial has no time period. Mr. Kerr, you had mentioned a 1-year delay. So what action are you talking about in the sense that, what direction are you giving the city in a sense to, for your reconsideration of this? Is there any reconsideration?
I'd be willing to reconsider, but only after a very thorough process has occurred where the city has actively worked with people in the area to see whether or not alternatives are viable, whether or not you can convince people that having 3,000 separate systems is better than having one, as Mr. King brought up. I just think we need to go out and work with them to see if there aren't some compromises that can be made. They care about the aquifer too, but they also care about their quality of life. And so somehow or other we may be able to find some balanced approach which most people could buy into. So personally I think it'd be worth taking a year to see if we can find a way to do that.
The motion did not have a time frame, however.
Well, I'm willing to put one in if you think it,
Would the second approve that?
for a year.
Second.
Okay, the motion
Thanks,
is
Bruce.
amended to have a 1-year time limit. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion carries. Adrian, would you read the motion back for the public so they know what has been done?
Well, I have very brief notes here. I have just that Mr. Carey moved to deny the 310 application.
No,
Or the
Excavation.
the excavation permit. And Jean Curtis seconded it with unanimous vote to approve. And also that Mr. Carey moved to have a one-year time limit
On the do not vote.
for reconsideration. Okay. I'm filling in for someone, folks. So, and there was a unanimous vote to approve that.
Okay, thank you, folks. There is, the last thing on our agenda is other comments. Does anyone have any other business you'd like to bring before the board? There being none, we're in recess. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.